Hello there everybody, I'm Mr. Goompie, this is Let's Play Crash Purple and Spyro Orange Part 3. Last time we went through the mini-games of the first world for both of these games. Crash and Spyro met up with each other at the end of the video, and they decided to team up. In this episode, we'll be looking at the hub worlds for the icy areas for both games. Now here's Crash's version of the spin the wheel minigame. It's pretty much the same as Spyro's, except while Spyro's little slider can land on potentially any part of his meter, Crash has a meter which actually fills up with segments, which are more easy to predict, at least as far as where they'll turn the wheel to. Alright, now here's Crash's first bonus game of the area. This area of the game actually holds the best place for grinding Wumpa fruits. It's not necessarily this minigame, though. This is where we start really having to bounce around on the boxes to get through the area. And that's the end of Crash. Yeah, I did it just a tad too slow that time. As you can see, second time around, I'm really bouncing like a pro. But yeah, I think that they throw that nitro block right there just to throw you off, because it looks like you can bounce off of it into the next block, but no, bouncing on nitro blocks is a bad idea. It doesn't work at all, man. Now, in the last world, Crash and Spyro were looking through their own worlds, essentially. Crash was in his own forest, Spyro was in dragon castles. However, as we get into the next worlds, we'll be seeing them explore different areas of the same world, and it looks pretty interesting because it really does show different thematics of the same world design. Now, this area is the best place for grinding Wumpa fruit, because if you're just trying to get Wumpa fruit, you don't have to break the TNT boxes, which saves you some time that you would normally have to spend, meaning that you generally won't run out of time. Also, there's just a lot of Wumpa fruit to get. And also, it's pretty easy to get through if you don't die. Because that is really the thing. That level's time limit is pretty lenient. I ended up having an extra 3 seconds at the end. But the chance for death, if you're trying to get all the boxes, is a lot higher than normal. Also, here's the Arctic Cliffs card, hidden behind a little crystal icy thing. Yes. I suppose technically ice is a crystal. But yeah, Crash is doing a lot of platforming over the water, and in general, this area probably has the most difficult platforming. It also has some fairly difficult minigames, but I wouldn't say necessarily the most difficult minigames. You see, this area, as usual for ice areas, has ice physics, and probably has some of the highest amounts of death pits in the game. Not quite the highest. That comes later, but it has a lot. And as such, you can easily slip off and, well, die instantly. We'll get even into more of that when we get over to Spyro. I assure you, we will get to that when we get to Spyro. So, yeah. How about we go ahead and switch on over to him? See what Spyro's up to. Ah, yes. He's learned how to jump mid-air, as Sparks is teaching him here. This is incredibly useful for Spyro. Also, Spyro didn't get a cutscene explaining that, the professor and Coco are working together for transportation issues and trying to find the evil duo. So he just has the professor and Coco tell him here. Also, it's kind of interesting that the characters appear to be bigger in Spyro's game. In general, everything is a lot more zoomed in, which isn't necessarily a good thing. trying to do a headbutt here, which Blinky tells you about right now, the headbutt timing is very awkward and it seems rather inconsistent. But yeah, here we have lots of platforming with ice physics. Alright, so obviously I didn't have ice physics problems the first time, but then that happens. Yeah, ice platforms and gaps with really small ice platforms doesn't work too well. In fact, I'd say that out of the two games, this bottom layer of this room is probably the hardest platforming section in the two games combined, especially when considering this part. These floating platforms are terrible. It's like sometimes it looks like you land on them, but you don't. You just fall straight through them. This doesn't usually happen when going from left to right, but when going from here to the other side, it's terrible. I died so much that I had no gems left. Alright, so Spyro has one or two mini-games in his worlds as well. We didn't get to see any in his first world because they require your future abilities to reach. However, in this world we can reach both of them right away. They aren't required for anything, they just get you more gems. On the other hand, they cost more gems to go into, and they always cost gems. If you're trying to grind for some jewels, I do not recommend using those. I recommend I recommend using certain shop minigames that are easy to win gems in. In particular, we'll actually see one later this episode. Here's Sergeant Bird. He's a penguin. That's pretty cool. Penguins are cool. And he has a jetpack, so he's extra cool. And he's just telling us about the thing that we learned at the beginning of this world. Now, by defeating certain animals, you can heal sparks. This bunny, for instance. Whenever defeating the bunnies, the butterfly that comes out of them becomes available instantly. However, defeating some enemies requires some time. Now here's the button mashing minigame for Spyro to get to his next room, and we all know what that means! It's time to see what Crash is up to. So yeah, Spyro started out in a cave. And then later on he heads to the outside of the mountain. Crash started on the outside of the mountain, and then ends up in a cave area. Kinda. I mean, a lot of this room is a cave area. Not all of it, though. This also has a tricky platforming section up top. However, unlike with Spyro, his being a tricky platforming section at the top of the area means that you don't die if you fall. But yeah, expect me to cut back to this section a couple of times. And yeah, here's Agent 9. He has a gun, so that's cool, I guess. And fall. Fortunately, by the power of editing, we're right back where we were just a second ago. Now, for the Moneybags tints, if it's a new thing that we haven't seen before, at least not for a particular character, I'll go ahead and go in. But if it's something like a regular shop that we've already seen, well, I'm gonna skip that. In any case, that minigame right there is probably one of the best ways to grind for Wumpas or gems without using any kind of particular level. Because it's not exactly hard to keep track of what you want. But yeah, trying to go on that pathway down there with the block, not a good idea. Also, this is where we began the area, so let's just cut back to this area. Now these scientist guys, known as, let's see here, I believe that they're known as the assistants. They're not very dangerous, they're pretty basic enemies, but whenever Spyro fights them, they lend out a terrible scream whenever he sets them on fire. But yeah, here we have Coco and the Professor working together. Because that's what they do. Spyro needed them next to each other so that they could tell him you know, what was going on, since he didn't get a cutscene. But Crash gets them anyway, because reasons. But hey, let's take that top path this time. I wonder if we'll find anything cool. Like the smaller version of Sergeant Bird. It's definitely a good thing that Crash has this zoomed out perspective, and I wish that Spyro would have it too so that you could see more of the area. I'm not sure why they didn't give it to him. Alright, so, we already went through Spyro's button mashing minigame, let's go through Crash's! Over time, the button mashing minigames here do get more difficult. I remember, back whenever, in Spyro's one, that actually got me stuck for a while because I couldn't melt the ice fast enough. To this day, I'm very bad at button mashing, but even back then, I was worse. It's hard to imagine. And here we have the mystery shop. This is the worst kind of shop, because it's just random what you get. Like there, I got a card, I got lucky, but it could have easily been nothing. I don't think it's entirely random. I believe that it does cycle through a series of possibilities, and then eventually does repeat itself, but I don't exactly have any concrete evidence of that, and maybe just probability was messing with me whenever I was testing it out. In any case, that's the entirety of Crash's area. Let's check out what Spyro's doing again. You see, Crash has an almost entirely horizontal area, meaning that he likely circles around the base of the mountain. However, Spyro has a big vertical area in this room, meaning that he's likely scaling the mountain and checking out this area. Also, that was the exit area for the section at the very top of the mountain. Meaning that, yeah, that's probably the idea here. So down here, below, we have the next bonus game that we'll be getting to shortly, after exploring some of these crevices, because there are a lot of ways to climb this mountain. A lot of different pathways to fall and climb. In particular, these branches are actually pretty cool, how they'll bounce you up a little bit higher. And they work pretty well with the double jump. I like the way that they implemented those. Also, something that I haven't really been showing off is that the torches in the background you can light on fire with Spyro's fire breath. It's not useful for anything, but you can do it, so yay! Now, because it's completely optional, I won't always be beating the bonus games, but I will at least be showing them off. Because, seriously, it's basically a waste of gems if you fail the minigame more than twice. Since, whenever you beat one of these minigames, you get twice the amount of gems that you put in. So this minigame costs 30 gems to get into, and thus, I will obtain 60 gems upon completing it, if I do. Of course, whenever it comes to a minigame like this, where you're actually collecting the jewels, it will stack upon that number. Now, in this minigame, there are exactly 20 jewels. You can't miss a single one, and I think that's pretty terrible. It would have been cool if it was kind of like the Switch palaces of Super Mario World, where just like a bunch of coins appear in those areas, and you try to figure out how many you can in a certain time limit. And it's like, if this area had, like, you know, just a bajillion jewels are all over the place, how many can you collect before the time runs out? But here it's, no, there are exactly 20 jewels, get to all of them, and if you don't, you fail. Overall, I only got, well, I lost 11 gems, essentially, since I spent 30 and obtained 19 within the minigame. But hey, at least they have the best gem grinding area in the game, which is kind of sad that it's this, because you don't get that many jewels if you successfully get the jewel of this minigame here. But that's not what I'm aiming for. I want the card, because it's a Crash card. You don't always get the chance to get those. But yeah, essentially, I'm just exploring the last pathways available, because we've seen all of the minigame entrances, we've tried all the minigames that we were going to play in this episode, you know, the bonus games. And we've checked out all the shops too. So next time, I'll do the mini games in this area. Until then, I've been Mr. Game & Pie.